Budget 2026, the growth agenda.
Hello and welcome to the show. Budget is just around the corner and corporate India is really watching out for the finance minister's budget speech. What's really going to be the key head turners? And while there is global turmoil, how is India resilient? What has been government's contribution? And at the current moment, what does the budget need to really address for a far better fortified economy of India? Let me welcome on the show our Mukundan, President Designate of CII, and Chandrajit Banerjee of CII. Gentlemen, so good to have you on NDTV Profit. Beginning with you, Chandrajit Banerjee, how do you see the current socio-economic, geopolitical scenario and the India's position in it, and what will corporate India really require at this point from the government?
So, because you are relating socio-economic to geopolitical, and we having just come back from Davos, I would start by saying that if there is a spot in the world which the world looks at as a reliable partner at this point in time, it is India, and because it is stable, we have had the best of economic growth. We have had also inclusion through our many projects like digitization, the DPI, and all of that, which has really benefited all. And we've seen a high growth rate, a very high growth rate, which is the highest in the world amongst emerging economies. But at the same time, we have seen inflation, which has been so very well controlled. And so the supporting fiscal conditions, the macroeconomic fundamentals and stability, and the structural reforms that one has seen, we've of course all seen the reforms expressed. So looking ahead, we see the next 12 to 18 months growth prospects to be very, very strong. There is a strong bounce back of demand for corporate sector doing well. And then the business confidence index very strong, and even to end with, I would think that there is good stable growth in private Capex. So these great fundamentals for us to see as we look at the budget, which is up there in a few days' time.
All right, the excitement in your voice about the budget is quite infectious, Chandrajit Banerjee and our Mukundan. Now, of course, we are faced, the entire corporate world and exporters like yourself, manufacturers like yourself, have been faced with a unusual problem globally of tariff war, where the Indian government has had a two-pronged strategy of diplomacy with the US and negotiations there, and on the other hand, doing FTAs with several other regions to open the market for the Indian producers. How do you see, as a corporate representative, this particular scenario and the uncertainty impacting the corporate world?
Thank you, Nisha. I think let me first start by saying that I want to compliment the government for a very, very deft handling of a very complex situation as it has evolved. And I think you already highlighted that. I think we have done it in two ways: never waste a crisis, focus on internal reforms. If you look at GST 2.0, if you look at what we've done with the labor codes, and in addition to that, also open up the economy by signing multitude of free trade agreement, whether it be with UAE, with UK, whether with Oman, and now with EU. I think what government has done is to make sure that Indian industry continues to be competitive and has got access in the markets around, and is able to sort of withstand the pressure which came in with the uncertainty which unfolded because of certain changes in the geopolitics as we saw it. And that has come out actually in terms of numbers too. The trade has held up well, the exports have held up well. Some sectors which have been impacted, but I can say that very, very quick handling by the exporters and the government jointly to identify new markets and identify new routes to access markets has led to a situation where I think most sectors, while they took a dip, I think have bounced back very well. And I think this the latest EU-India trade deal also augurs well. That does not mean we don't start working towards signing up one which is left just now, which is a US deal. It's work in progress, and hopefully that gets done. But what is very critical, which is going into this budget, is it actually lays the foundation for what needs to come next in terms of elements which will take us forward, which is high growth, high level of innovation, high level of sustainability, and high level of external engagement. If you combine all this,
Yes.
finance minister has already alluded to that this budget, she's going to focus on indirect taxes, which is a very welcome move because some of the things which can be unlocked there are yet to come. In addition to that, I think if we can also access new ways of funding the government to open up and continue its focus on infrastructure and building innovation platforms, I think we would have done excellently well. And that would address one of the core concerns I think we all have as India tries to grow, is the growth of skilling, growth of talent, and growth of what we call sound jobs in a world which is increasingly has to embrace AI, has to embrace digital.
That's right. You've encapsulated a lot of points and a huge wish list there coming in from corporate India from the budget, R. Mukundan. But Chandrajit Banerjee, out of all these aspects, of course, fiscal prudence is a challenging task, and that's going to be very important. Considering that rupee has dropped to its lowest ever levels, and on the other hand, there are global macro factors which are really impacting our economy as well, and also our import bill and oil bill is dependent on our purchasing power of our currency. Putting a lot of these aspects macroeconomic wise, what do you think should be the main point and agenda of the finance minister?
See, I think one of the biggest achievements of India in the last few years have been its fiscal prudence. And this has been very strictly adhered to since the time of COVID. Actually, we have been very, very, very strong as far as fiscal discipline is concerned. And I think our view would be that fiscal discipline and growth can go together. And a right type of focus on the right type of spending. And that's going to be critical. What India did was to have a very strong focus on public capex. And I would imagine that increasing capex by 12% or so in the forthcoming budget would be a prudent way of looking at to how do we spur economy and counter some of the points that you mentioned. The other area of when you talk about fiscal discipline, etc., is the debt to GDP ratio. We are at 54.5, right? And if we are able to keep that with a tolerance limit, that would be very, very important. The third part, of course, is the fiscal deficit itself. We have a glide path. Adhering to the glide path, keeping that 4.2% for 27 fiscal would be extremely important. That's a very, 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 very critical area of work. Now, as we do that, there are certain spendings that we would require. I mean, the quality of spending, and so better targeting of subsidies is something that one would expect, and one would expect. How do we reduce leakages? And I think that's something, it's a very important, I mean, when we are talking about direct benefit mechanisms, and this will keep the macro stability intact while we are looking at higher levels of growth rate. So capital expenditure creates jobs, it boosts productivity, it'll of course also crowd in private investment.
Yes.
I think this is the sort of, and one last point on that is state level capex. How do we really focus from moving from the central level capex to seeing to it that the states are incentivized and given more space and even loans for state level capex to pick up?
That's right. Very, very critical points mentioned there. But when we talk about Capex cycle, with the GST reforms, where a lot of deductions have been done to really boost consumption, and that has been run recently, probably the elbow room for the government to really spend is going to be limited. R. Mukundan, will private Capex pick up in a big way, and what is needed for that to really happen?
So one of the things, Nisha, I want to highlight is I think the private capex in many sectors actually has picked up. I think as the capacity utilizations have jumped much closer to 80-85%, many companies have started to sort of invest, and I think you would continue to see a boost in the private capex going forward. It was lagging behind the government capex spend for 2 years back, but now it probably is catching up, and the companies are very well incentivized to put capital on the ground. With the signing of many of these FTAs and the access which Indian companies have got, I think that's a big boost to external sector that is also going to drive capex. And many of the foreign companies, the international companies, are also looking to invest in India. Because the diversification of supply chain, building resilience in supply chain away from dependency on one single country, I think is now a theme which has gathered even greater momentum. And I think India offers the optionality for people. And I think these reforms which government has put in place and the signing of these FTAs has only strengthened the attractiveness of India as a destination market. What we need to do is when capital does come in, we need to act with speed. So it's not about ease of doing business, also the speed of doing business needs to and in that, some of the bottlenecks we do have is, for example, access to land is one of the key bottlenecks. We've been saying create a national digital land bank, which people can access, get access to land when the industries have to be set up, and also access to the whole element of labor so that the living condition of labor improves. So what we've also been recommending is things like providing access to hostels for a labor force to stay in good living conditions. So these are all things which I think come at the tertiary level, but now they're becoming increasingly important. What you highlighted just a bit before is that not only should the center work, now a lot of this effort has to shift to states, and states have to also improve the ease of and attracting business to their industrial centers. And I think a lot has been done by few states, a lot of heavy lifting, but I think every state must now need to pull forward, and anything government can do to incentivize that, to make sure the states are egged along and nudged along to deliver on ease of doing business and the speed of doing business, which is always a welcome move. And whatever budget can do in that manner in terms of nudging would be very positive element.
The Atmanirbhar Bharat, momentum that was started by the government earlier has never made more sense than in the present context. R. Mukundan, you will agree with that. And also the PLI schemes by the government. There again, a few of the at least startup companies and certain sectors have really pointed out that it should be not sunsetting much sooner than the really projects take off from the ground. What else can be done on PLI, and what is the ask of the corporate India when it comes to these kind of projects by the government?
So I think, Nisha, one of the things you highlighted is when many of these schemes start, there is always it takes time for them to gather momentum. And very clearly, early sunset of some of these things is counterproductive at times. And I think it's only fair to ask, and within the fiscal prudence government can do, I think it's important that we pursue. So there are things like critical minerals, there are things like electronics, there are things like some of the key defense areas. These key areas, I think, helping the private sector to come up to speed, to fill the gap and make sure that it can invest with boldness is going to be something which is going to play a lot of big dividends. India is going to become a hub for sourcing, not just for the key minerals, key processes, or not just for electronics in the long run, but also for defense. I think these areas augur extremely well. As one of the key areas I want to just say is that the world tends to move from 2%, 3% to 5% of GDP spend on defense. It will open up a huge market for Indian private sector, which is already having build capabilities due to Atmanirbhar, which you referred to. I think same way we've seen the big boost electronics has got in exports, in accessing international market. I think we should double down on that and increase the outcome. Also, one of the other areas, we just tend to not to speak about agriculture and food processing, a big opportunity.
Yes.
I think the opportunity for Indian food to reach world market after processing is again a big opportunity, which I think we should continue to focus. And bringing jobs here through GCC again is a service sector area, but I think today these GCCs are doing very complex processes, and I think building scale in them is also going to help us. So it's going to be all-round effort, areas where I think there's high import dependency and export opportunity. There is going to be areas where agriculture can play a larger role in food security around the world. There is an opportunity in what we call as a defense security around the world. And finally, building capabilities in service sector, where I think India can serve the world as a center for giving its capability access to entire world to become more efficient and more competitive.
That's right. Indian companies have to be much more competitive, and their funding plays a very important role. Mr. Mukundan, any word on that? Because, FDI is something that we have been attracting. FII outflow has happened. Japan has raised its interest rate, which has been really funding a large part of our infrastructure. On the other hand, there is a global turmoil. So how do you see the funding requirements, especially from global pools, and what can India do for domestic pools?
I think if you look at the private sector, I think what government has done in terms of emphasizing on what governance standards will make sure that the foreign funds, when they want to come to India, access the capital markets, there'll be robust resonance with them. In fact, what you see in Indonesia unfold today was because of concerns on the governance issue. So I think the government rightly has focused through Ministry of Corporate Affairs on making sure the governance standards are one of the best in the world. So leave that aside. I think in terms of the government funding itself, which is an element which is the key talking point during the budget, I think the focus needs to be looking at the opportunity which the capital market affords to government in terms of also going through what I would call disinvestment 2.0, where we can we can go another round of fresh disinvestment, which can then, that capital can then be used to develop what I would call infrastructure and strategic fund, which then government is able to pinpoint and target its finances to build resilience in sectors which it wants to sort of focus on. So clearly, it's going to be focusing on capital markets, making sure those capital markets, both equity and debt, are in vibrant condition, and at the same time, utilizing that capital market resonance to sort of raise capital for the government through some of the world-class companies government already has created.
That's right. In fact, on that particular front, MSME is a space which needs a lot of upliftment, a lot of support and funding as well. Chandrajit Banerjee, what does MSME need from the budget?
So, that's going to be very, very critical. Actually, now MSME is micro, small, medium. That itself three very, very different categories. So if I can really first focus on the mid-size and the smaller companies, I think what is the present constraint? Number one is, of course, the constraints of capital. Capital support, and here comes in the issue of patient capital, some sort of a capital support mechanism that can be available to them, especially for manufacturing projects, which could be typically between 50 crores and say about 1,000 odd crores. And that scheme we could create a sort of a mechanism where we could look at funding or rather looking at an interest-free loan. So there's a participation in it and covering 50% of capital with a sort of a long-term, for a 10-year sort of a moratorium and a phased sort of a repayment. That will help enable them enable them to take the type of risk that we would wish that they are able to take, which is not possible for them at this point in time. So we are looking at a sort of a 10,000 odd crore type of a fund of funds, so to say, for growth capital, modernization, R&D, be ready for IPO or be ready for acquisitions and all of that. And that also gets into technology. And really, those are the type of stuff that they would require. Now, looking at the micro side of it, which is again a very, very important, where we need to situate that we create mechanisms with partnership with the large companies, because the micros are going to support the large companies also in many ways, to create how do we build them up into the chain of competitiveness. So digital transformation for them, getting them to be a better entrepreneur, which are in tune with the times of today. So all of this is a system which we should sort of the budget itself could be an enabler to all of this in a very big
That's
way.
right. That's right. That is one important aspect there. But Mukundan, tax concessions, that must be a huge demand from corporate India. Tell us about what is expected and what corporate India wants.
See, on taxation, one of the things we've been wanting to say always is, we need certainty and a long-term certainty. I think that's one of the key things which we need to work on, we continue to focus on. I think in terms of indirect tax, we've been saying that a lot has been locked up in disputes. Maybe one-time amnesty scheme could work for everybody. Second is, if you look at customs, I think we can look at a very visionary digital transformation of customs, which is paper-free India as far as custom processes are concerned, so things can move at digital speed. In terms of direct taxation, again, I think we need to move from towards a trust-based tax administration where dispute is prevented rather than created. And this needs to work through, the advanced rulings which come in, where we actually man them with adequate number of high court judges so that they can give advanced rulings to ensure that dispute is prevented. And we need to also look at some of the areas like simplifying IT procedures, whether it be for TDS, TCS, there are so many categories. Can we simplify them? Can we make them 2 or 3 categories? I think these are the elements which the budget needs to focus on. Clearly, indirect tax is one big area which I think the government needs to now sort of take up the step. Direct tax work has been done, but here the main effort would be to further simplify what has already been done in the last 2 budgets.
That's right. In fact, budget tax simplification and efficiency has been a constant journey by the government. And there again, a lot of success has been achieved. But my final question to you, Mr. Mukundan, and that is on job creation. Personally, for me, as I see from my vantage point of the whole economy and the corporate India, job creation is one of the critical factors which can really pain the economy going forward and the citizens of the country. How is corporate India looking at it? And whatever steps the government has proposed in the previous budgets, are they really working?
I think the government and industry are both focused on ensuring that jobs as a key matter is addressed, not just in the budget, but as a general growth agenda. I think growth itself creates job and job opportunities. But I think one of the key elements we need to say, in addition to investment and growth, is the skilling effort which we do. Is our skilling effort future ready? For example, do we have enough of digital, enough of AI, enough of skills which are perfect for the market? I think the several schemes government has introduced in the last 2 budgets have done very well in terms of making it more robust. We are actually looking at India's skill not only for Indian industry, but also India's skill for addressing the world needs. As the world population ages, I think this is the right time that we need to focus much harder on making sure that we have got a skilled talent which is future ready, and creating that pool is going to be extremely critical. it is a journey, and I completely agree with you. I think if there is one challenge we all need to be constantly on the lookout is this jobs question, not just from the perspective of that India has got a large pool of manpower coming into the market, but also in terms of the AI challenge. How do we keep everybody ready for the challenge when the time comes? So clearly, it's an area which both government and industry are focused on, making our institutions more resilient, more able, and more capable. When I say institutions, these are education and skilling institutions, and working with them along with industry, I think is a way forward, which I think government has already laid out a good roadmap.
That's right. Many points made there, and this is one particular aspect where probably the labor code also gives a lot more sanity to the labor class and makes the area much more conducive for the working class as well. But R. Mukundan, Chandrajit Banerjee, thank you so much for sharing so many insights from economy to company to taxation on how the budget should really come along with corporate India in the growth journey of India. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining in, and we'll pick up this particular topic post the budget. Thank you. All right, with that, it's a wrap on this special edition of What Corporate India Wants from the Budget 2026. Thank you so much for tuning in. Keep it with NDTV Profit.
Budget 2026, the growth agenda.